everyone. Welcome to Open Discussions. Have you ever had a time where you were going through some tough moments in your life and then you wanted to talk to someone, but then suddenly you're afraid that that person is not going to understand you or not going to see things from your perspective? Well, my co host, Christine Blanchard, and I are very, very lucky because we have with us a medical and anxiety expert, Dr. Russell Kennedy, who actually goes through anxiety himself. And he's just amazing that he's with us. So, Christine, I am very happy that we have Dr. Russ with us. Thank you, Doctor, for joining us.
Hey, it's my pleasure. It's great to be here.
Yes, we're excited to have you on the show and welcome again. And you're also an author of the book, Anxiety RX 2020.
Yeah, it's not, Anxiety RX is the name. 2020 is the year it came out. So
yes.
It's not like anybody's anxious here in 2020. I mean, it's been a pretty nondescript year so far, pretty boring, not much to it. But it's a book on anxiety because, as Jackie was saying, I've dealt with anxiety most of my life. And it came from growing up with a father who was schizophrenic. And I remember being 12 or 13 and watching them taking him away in the ambulance to the mental hospital and just thinking, one day I got to make this mean something. One day I have to turn all this pain into something that helps other people. So that's basically what I've done with my life. I became a medical doctor, a yoga and meditation teacher, a stand-up comic, just to kind of spread some fun in the world and some healing as well. So I've always thought that I was a bit of a misfit, because you don't see too many stand-up comedians who are doctors. So that's a bit of an odd combination as well. So, I've always been a bit of a misfit, but it's only been in the last probably 5 or 10 years I've realized how all of these things have kind of fit together.
Mm-hmm. I mean, was there when was a pivotal moment that you decided to write the book? And it was released in April, right?
No, it was just released last week. Yeah.
Wow,
I mean, originally, you're right. Originally, it was supposed to be released in April, but because, I'm an optimist, I think that things are going to get done faster than they are. And there's end with a book. I had no idea. I finished writing the book on July the 1st, and it just got released this week. So there was 3 months of, editing and this and that and making sure this got put in and that got taken out. And yeah, so it finally got released just this week. So it got released, I think, officially on October the 9th, which is my parents' anniversary. And originally the Kindle version got released on October the 5th, which was my dad's birthday. So it was kind of like divine intervention in there, trying to finally get it out. But it was supposed to come out in April. That was a long, drawn-out answer to it was supposed to come out in April.
Well, we're very excited. I was just telling Christine, I downloaded Kindle so that I can get a hold of your book. It's probably something we've been waiting for a long time, right?
Mm-hmm.
And Dr. Russ, I just have a question, because you mentioned that you have gone through anxiety all your life.
Yeah.
So is it something hereditary, or is it something you develop while you're young, or how does anxiety come about, or panic attacks even?
I think there's a combination. I think with me, I write in the book, it's like, you can be sensitive and grow up in a loving, caring environment, or you can be, thick-skinned and grow up in an environment that's not so nurturing. For me, I was a very sensitive kid, and I grew up in this sort of chaotic environment with my dad. My mom loved us as best she could, but she was the full-time breadwinner. She was out working quite a bit at the time. So me being as sensitive as I was and being the oldest, I kind of took on my dad's kind of caregiving role from the time I was about 13 or 14 until he eventually committed suicide when he was 26, when I was 26. So, and he was 52. So I adopted this kind of caregiving role, which is a lot of what anxiety people do. A lot of us are firstborns in our family. A lot of us take on more responsibility than we're ready for. And I think that creates a lot of alarm in our system, and we never really get past that. So I've tried to help people understand where their anxiety comes from, because a lot of people just don't know where it comes from. And I believe it's old unresolved trauma that gets stored in our body. When we're kids, we can only handle so much trauma. And then after you get too much trauma, it starts being stored in your body and it just resonates from that point on. So I don't believe that anxiety has really a tremendous amount to do with the mind, actually. I think it's more this unresolved trauma energy that's stored in our body. And the mind just reflects it, because the mind is this make sense, compulsive meaning making machine. So when it feels this alarm energy in our body, it has to make a story that's consistent with that energy. That energy feels uncomfortable and scary, so the mind makes up an uncomfortable and scary story, which goes back, and as the body believes that scary story, creates more alarm, which creates more anxiety, which creates more alarm. So it creates what I call the alarm anxiety loop. So you just get into this alarm anxiety. Most people think anxiety is just one thing, like it's just thoughts of the mind. And I really found out through a trip on LSD once that my anxiety was actually in my body. It wasn't actually in my mind at all. I mean, it's there a little bit, but it's the energy that's stored in your body that reflects through your mind. And as you say it out loud, it confirms it. So you get more and more convinced that you have anxiety. You get more and more convinced that maybe you can solve it by talking about it, which I don't find that you can. I find that you really have to go in. My wife is a somatic trauma therapist. So she deals with trauma that's stored in the body, and she helps people bring that trauma out. Now, you need the mind. You need to be able to explain it. You need to be able to develop a way of explaining what happened to you. But I think we get overcaught by trying to explain what happened to us all the time. And I think in some people that's actually re-traumatizing. So what Cynthia does, and she's taught me how to do a lot as well, is to get people into their body. Like, where do you feel the anxiety? And that's what I tell people when I do interviews and stuff. I said, when you get anxious, try and find a place in your body that's upset. It's not so much your mind. Your mind is just making sense of it. It's your body where it is. So it's usually somewhere between your chin and your pubic bone. It's almost always in the midline. It's usually around your heart, but for a lot of people, it's in their throat, especially for people that weren't able to say something or aren't able to say something to someone. The energy gets stuck in your throat. And I know as a medical doctor, I want to have a seizure sometimes when I talk about this more ethereal stuff, because it's nothing I learned in medical school. This is all, my intuition, dealing with 100,000 patients as I have over my, 25 years of practice. And it's a new paradigm. And that's what I bring out in the book. Like, the way we're looking at anxiety is not all wrong, but most of it is. Most of it is, we're trying to fix the thoughts of the mind, when really it's the alarm that's stored in the body. It's kind of like having a hole in a boat, and you're in this boat and the boat is filling up with water. Now you can bail the water out and, feel a little bit more comfortable because you bailed the water out. That's kind of like dealing with the thoughts. But the underlying problem, the underlying hole in the boat, that's what you have to go in deep and go in there and fix. And that's what's in the body. And once you can clear that trauma energy out of the body, the thoughts have nothing to feed them anymore. So you don't pay much attention to them. And that's what I found as I've healed, as I've progressed, and I've gotten sort of adapted to the alarm in my body and not giving it a tremendous amount of weight. The thoughts are so much easier to discount when your body isn't in alarm.
Yes. How is your book different from other books? Like, how, what can people find reading your book?
Well, there's a lot of stories in there. It's a lot of my life. It's a lot of my life dealing with my dad. It's a lot of my life burning out as a medical doctor. It's a lot of my patients who, people come in to see me with, stomach ache, chronic headaches, all that kind of stuff. But really underneath it all is this sense of anxiety or depression or alarm, right? So I was really good at getting at the root cause for people. So, the book talks a lot in stories, because I think that's how we learn as human beings. Because I want people to recognize themselves if in me or, in my patients, because, I have patients I mentioned in there with eating disorders. I have patients in there with, chronic migraines, something that people can say, hey, that sounds a lot like me. And this is what I did for them. This is how I showed them how they can turn it around and understand it. Because if you can understand it in awareness, one of my little catchphrases that I use in the book all the time is that if you can see it, You don't have to be it anymore. Because if you can consciously bring your attention to, and this is true for patterns, my mother's a huge hypochondriac. I was a huge hypochondriac and kind of still am to some extent. So it's a pattern I can see, and I can see that pattern got handed down to me. Now I know when I get into this sort of is there something wrong with me? I'm feeling my throat. Is this a tumor? Whatever. I know I can almost laugh at it now because I know that that's my go-to, and that I develop awareness of what I call the tells of my own anxiety. So in the book, I talk about what are your tells? Like, what are the common stories that you tell yourself? I have a friend who's a business guy. He's paranoid that he's going to die penniless and homeless, even though he's making a lot of money, so we have these stories, and they're not really based in truth. They're based in these old stories that we tell ourselves when we're like 5, 6, 7 years old. And because there's no one else in our head to refute those stories, we keep living them out.
Wow, I was watching one of your videos on YouTube, and you mentioned that when you're anxious, fear is different from anxiety. I think that was a huge aha moment for me. That fear is when there's an elephant there, there's an impending fear, the elephant's going to like step on you or something. Anxiety is when you're worried that there is going to be an elephant, but it's not really there. So it's like you're worrying about something that may not even happen.
Yeah, I mean, anxiety is all about the future, right? Like you can't be anxious. Like I can't be anxious about turning 50 because I turned 50 years ago, right? You can't be anxious about I was anxious before it, but you can't be anxious about something that's already happened. And anxiety is always about the future. So if you can realize that, and this is a question that I get people to ask themselves all the time when in the middle of the day or the middle of the night when they're upset, is am I safe in this moment? Like, am I safe in this moment? Just looking around right now, like the three of us, can we just take 2 seconds and look around and go, yeah, I'm perfectly safe in this moment? Because what happens with people with anxiety is they develop this mindset that they're always in danger. They consciously know that they're not, but unconsciously, where a lot of our programs are run, there's always this vigilance, typically because, when they were children, there was this sense of, unknowing, and we didn't know what was going to happen next. And so we had to be this vigilant. So we train our brains to be this, acutely aware of everything all the time. And then when you come to the realization that you can consciously decide, hey, you know what, for the next 5 seconds, I'm safe. Maybe in an hour, I have to go do a talk for, my parent-teacher organization, or I have a big exam tomorrow. But right now, in the moment that I'm in, and this is especially good in the middle of the night, when you wake up, it's like, I've got to do this, I got to do this, I got to do this, and just say, am I safe in this moment? Because what you're doing is you're teaching your unconscious mind that you are actually safe. It can stand down. It doesn't have to sort of maintain this illusion that you have to be on guard all the time. Yeah, and when you consciously draw attention to the fact that you are safe, then things start to get a little easier. And then those safety moments you start making more and more. I get people to do that multiple times a day. Just, when you're driving your car, and not waiting until you're stressed right out and anxious before you do it. If you're having a good day, just say, I'm safe in this moment. If you're having a bad day, am I safe in this moment? And just reassuring yourself that you are safe regardless. And the more you do that, the more you break that spell, because it is this kind of unconscious, magical loop that your brain gets into. And it's the same kind of thing with combat veterans from PTSD, because when they're in a war zone, they could be killed at any moment. And then they get back home and their body thinks that they could still be killed at any, their mind knows that they're, they're in their car, they're driving down the street, they're going to their grocery store, but their body doesn't. And that's my whole premise about all this alarm in the body. We have to bring that alarm out in a very controlled environment. And then when we metabolize that alarm, the thoughts just tend to disappear. And I can tell you that from my own experience. Once I started dissipating the alarm, the thoughts just they either didn't come up or they didn't have the resonance behind them that kept them going.
Wow.
Yeah, I can see it's all the alarms and the triggers are all coming from trauma or, experience in the past or pain. How are we going to reconcile with our past trauma? Is there Is there a quick and easy way so that at least someone can cope right now
Yeah.
and then slowly heal?
Yeah. I mean, sometimes we do need other people, Jackie. I mean, sometimes it just is one of those things that we can't do it for ourselves. You know, when we were born, we relied on our mother to kind of regulate our nervous system, because when we're, up until about 6 months to a year, we don't see any difference between ourselves and our mother. So whatever she's feeling, we're feeling, so, and this is true, for women who are brought up in war zones or in terrible conditions. If the mother's stressed, the baby will pick up on that. And we read each other and we feel each other, even though we're very verbal creatures, we still feel each other. And I think it's really important, when you get a therapist, especially for anxiety, that you get one that's really familiar with the body, that's familiar with, okay, where do you feel that in your body? And, when I do readings on people or do consults on people and I start asking them this stuff, they say, no one's ever asked me that before. It's always, my husband does this and it's driving me crazy and I don't know if I could stay with them. And it's been, we've got 2 kids, we're handcuffed together, we can't get away. And I say, okay, where do you feel that in your body? And they'll look at me like, huh? And I'll say, where do you feel that? Like, close your eyes, think of you and your husband separating, the kids living in 2 different places. You guys are trying to organize your lives with this thing. Maybe he starts seeing somebody else. Where do you feel that? And usually it's in the chest. And I go, well, it's kind of in here. And then I'll say, is it hard or is it soft? It's like, well, it's kind of mushy. And I said, does it have a distinct border around it or is it kind of diffuse? It's like, well, it's kind of diffuse. Is it hot or cold? Oh, it's really hot. Like, it feels really, really hot. Does it press anywhere? It's yeah, it presses up on my heart. And I said, that's your alarm. That's what we need to deal with. It's not so much like, how am I going to deal with the nuts and bolts of, my husband if we divorce? It's how can I connect with myself? Because all anxiety is separation anxiety. That's what Gordon Neufeld says. He's a developmental psychologist from Vancouver. And then I changed that up to all alarm is separation alarm. So it's really separation from yourself. So the more you split, and this happens in childhood. So if we examine the traumas that we have in childhood, they tend to split us. We tend to there's a little saying that says, if a child is abandoned or abused, they don't stop loving the parent, they stop loving themselves. Right? So they stop loving themselves and then they split from that point on. And a lot of us become people pleasers. We become able to read other people, give them what they want, but we never really ever again learn how to give ourselves what we need. And really that alarm in our system, I believe, not to get too weird out or ethereal here, I believe that's our younger self. I believe that's our younger self asking, with our hands up, like, can you pick me up? Can you hold me? And if you had a child in front of you that was asking to be picked up, and you of course you'd pick that child up and you'd comfort them and stuff. So why don't we do that for ourselves?
Wow, excellent. I mean, what about, like, you do yoga and your meditation as well, a teacher, right, Dr. Kennedy?
Yeah.
And I mean, meditation helps. What about exercise? Like, it can, like, running, it helps me when, generally speaking.
Yeah. I mean, we start creating cortisol, which is kind of like a hormone that gets us ready for fight or flight. We create adrenaline specifically. And if we're not doing much with that adrenaline, it can cause a lot of problems in our system, high blood pressure, that kind of thing. My 15-year-old son, he gets on this game called Team Fortress 2, where everybody's blowing each other up and they're shooting and there's a bat and there's all this stuff. And I watch him breathe, on that. And he's like, oh, I can tell by what game. And he also has other games that are not violent at all. They're more puzzle games and stuff. And I can tell I can stand outside his room and I can tell which game he's playing by how he's breathing. So I think it's, this physiology that we have in our system, it's just learning how to connect with our own physiology, because we split from it a long time ago. And then we live in this neck up society. And I coined this term the other day and I wrote about it on Elephant Journal, called cognitive bypassing, which is what a lot of coaches do is they try and help people through their childhood trauma by helping them explain it. by helping them understand, the story behind it. And really, in a lot of people, that can just re-traumatize them. So really what we need to do is get people into that old story, but say, where do you feel that in your body? Where do you feel that in your system? And then come alongside them. Sometimes especially with our kids, if they get stressed out, ask them, where do you feel that in your body? And really focus on it, temperature, color. It doesn't, that stuff doesn't really matter. You really just want them to describe where they feel it. Some of the kids will feel it down lower. Some of them feel it right over their heart. Some of them feel it in their throat. And then say, well, just put your hand over that, honey, and just hold it for a second and just feel that you're connected to yourself at that point. Because really that's what you're doing. That if that alarm is your younger traumatized self and you're touching and you're putting your hand over it. And then if you got the invitation, then you put your hand over their hand and then they put their other hand, like it's almost like the thing with baseball, trying to pick a team. And then you just hold it there. And then you can just you'll see their shoulders drop. You'll see them start to breathe differently. And then you can say, can you just sort of slow your breathing down for a second? Just focus on your breath and just sit there. And, and sometimes putting your hand on their back as well. You just want to calm the nervous system is really what you want to do. They want to have some safe person with them that you can regulate that nervous system. Because when you can regulate their nervous system, that alarm will start to come to the surface and then you can start to metabolize it. Otherwise, it just stays stuffed down. You can have a great talk with your kids and yeah, it helps, but it doesn't really get at that underlying problem. So it's really focusing on where they feel something in their body. And a lot of them won't know. Like a lot of them are so out of touch with their body, with all their screens and that kind of stuff. They don't know. They just think it's in their head. But if you slowly and be patient with them and just say, look, I'm pretty sure there's something in your body that is getting flared up here. And I'll just pace them. And what I'll do is I'll take them into a situation like, okay, you're walking down the hall at school and you're walking by the classroom of that teacher that doesn't like you. What's going on in your body? Like, can you feel that? And they'll say, yeah, sometimes I'm maybe in my stomach a little bit. And then, does it feel good or bad? It's like, no, it feels bad. And just get them to really find that alarm in their system, because that's what we have to deal with. Talking it out is great. I mean, people have a connection and we feel connected, but we're not actually getting at the underlying cause until we start dissipating some of that alarm. So that's really what the book is about, is finding the alarm, which makes the book different than anything else, because I don't think anyone has really pulled out this concept before, that it's actually a sense of alarm in the body more than it is the mind. And I'm a neuroscientist. I study the brain. I it's not that I'm off. I don't pay much attention to the brain. The brain is my jam. If you want to talk about the bed nucleus of the stria terminalis and the basal ganglia and the nucleus accumbens, I can talk about all that stuff. But I think it's much more important and practical, especially for parents or for anyone who's struggling with anxiety, is to really isolate where you feel that alarm in your body. And if you can't metabolize it yourself, then find someone who can help you, who's like a somatic trauma therapist. Hakomi is another type of therapy that's used. But somatic experiencing, if you go to traumahealing.org, they have somatic experiencing therapists, and they have them all over the world, and you can pick one that's close to you. But I'm really a big believer in those for anxiety. I don't think that the talk therapy alone really does any long-term good. CBT helps initially, but it tends to wear off over time. So unless you really get at the underlying issue, you're just kind of bailing water out of the boat.
Sometimes there are movies that we watch where people go to their psychologist or psychiatrist and they just discuss the same issues over and over again.
Yeah.
I think that's what you're trying to say, that until you actually connect with yourself or like be grounded again with that part of your body, you cannot let go. It's like grounding to let go.
Yeah. And grounding that's a great point, Jackie, because a lot of it is grounding, because you can't metabolize this stuff if you're feeling alarmed. If you're feeling alarmed, you can't metabolize this. So you have to be grounded, putting your feet flat on the floor, putting your hands on your chest, just focusing on your breath, just breathing, because a lot of times for people that worry, they worry to keep themselves out of their body. And that's something I also put in the book too. The reason why worries, people say worry serves no purpose. Worry serves a hell of a purpose, because what it does is when we get these childhood wounds and we stuff all this trauma into our bodies, worry keeps us in our heads. Because if the more we worry and the worse the worries are, the less likely we're going to venture down into feeling town again, which is really painful because we don't want to go back there. So worrying actually keeps us out of our body. But what we have to do to heal is to go back into our body. And sometimes we need other people to help us along that journey, because it's just too painful sometimes to go back and visit our old traumas just by ourselves. So that's why some of the trauma therapists are really good at just staying present, going really slowly. I find people go way, way, way too fast when it comes to trauma. It's like, just let it come out, And then the other thing I was talking about before is cognitive bypassing, which is this attempt to try and explain what happened, and just under the guise that once you explain it and you understand what happened. Yeah, my brother used to beat me up I'm making this up, but my brother used to beat me up from the time that I was 7 till I was 14. And, it's great to understand that. But it's like, where is that trauma stored in your body? Because that's what's generating all the problems. It's not the thoughts so much. The thoughts make it worse, no doubt. Absolutely no doubt. But it's the alarm. It's the underlying alarm that we have to go at. So we're trying to get in an unconscious program, like something that we're not consciously aware of, but we're trying to do it with conscious words. So we're really using, it's like an Australian going to Japan and trying to explain, how do you get to the train station? The Japanese will know by the tone, the voice and stuff, and the pointing and that sort of stuff, the rough idea of what he wants, but he can't really communicate. So if you speak the same language, and if you get into that same unconscious plane, which is where all the traumas are held, and you start talking, maybe isn't the right word, but you start communicating with those traumas, putting your hand over them, sitting with them for a long time and just waiting for something to come up, and just not being too focused on what it says right away, because often the first things that you get are your mind's kind of interpretations of what this feeling is. But if you can wait and just wait with it for another 30 seconds or 60 seconds and just sit there in silence with this alarm, just saying, I've got you, I'm with you, and just see what comes out. Like sometimes other memories of the same time will come out, and you'll know that you're getting somewhere with that. But if you start just going, okay, well, I feel this pain. Well, where did it come from? Well, I remember seeing the house sign on my lawn saying my parents were selling the house, and I knew everything was going to go terrible after that. And then they get down that, they just focus on that story. And really, it's not about the story. It's about, okay, how can you focus on that part of you that felt so hurt when you saw that real estate sign in your lawn? Where is that? Where do you feel that in your body? And can we bring that out? Now, we can use words after that, of course, to help kind of refine it. But really, you need to get at that connection to that unconscious program that's causing the problem in the first place. The icing on the cake is being able to kind of explain it and work through it. But you really need to metabolize it and feel it and give yourself another safe place in your body to go, which is one more thing I'd just like to add to that. So when we feel this alarm in our body, the other thing that Cynthia, my wife, gets me to do when I go back into my stuff, say, where is a place in your body that feels good or at least neutral? So I've got a sort of a breathing practice that I do. So, I said, when I breathe in here, this actually feels really calming to me. And then she says, okay, can we go back and forth? Can we go back into that trauma of, say, one of my traumas was being, bullied in grade 7? Can we go back into that trauma, that feeling? And then can you at the same time go into this feeling of feeling good, this part in your body that feels good? Because what that does is it trains your unconscious that this isn't all encompassing. This pain is not all of you. You can actually find a place in your body that feels comfortable. So you can go back and forth, and that breaks the spell as well. So, I'm actually going pretty deep with you guys. Usually I don't go this deep with people right off the bat, but I really feel like you hear me and you feel me and you know what I'm saying. So the bottom line is that we have to really go at that underlying unconscious trauma, and we can't get at that by speaking to it. You know, you have to get it by feeling. And one of my favorite little quotes that I like is, you can't heal a feeling problem with a thinking solution. You know,
I feel like we're going through therapy, Christine.
Yes.
I feel like I'm a renewed person.
well,
Yes.
people come up to me in the grocery store and go, hey, are you, it's like, my wife is doing this. And it's like, I'm trying to get some potatoes here. This is all I'm trying to do.
Just let me get my potatoes.
You need to get some bananas and stuff like that. But people.
But Dr. Kennedy, I'd like to know about your comedy, your stand-up comedy work.
Yes. Is that your go-to? Is that a way for you to release all your?
Yeah, I think so. The funny thing about my comedy is that I was very interested in making people laugh, and I would choose topics that would make people laugh, and not necessarily ones that I wanted to talk about. Because as a physician and a comedian, I'm kind of hemmed in. I have to be quite clean. I would swear a little bit here and there. And it's not that I want to talk about all these, horrendous subjects or whatever, but I really felt like I wrote material to be funny, as opposed to just saying what I thought was funny. Saying the stuff in the world that I think is, way off base and way off balance. So I would write things, about smart cars or, just different goofy little things. And they're funny for sure, but they never really had any real resonance with me. So if I had to go back and do my comedy career again, I would start from the stuff that really, that really bothers me about the world, and talk about that. But, it was fun. I still loved it. And there was times where I did get into stuff that I was, that I really felt passionate about. But typically, I think that I went in there with the idea of to be funny, as opposed to just be real. Not that I was really inauthentic, but I just, I would have loved to have gone in there and just really talked about how much I hated being a doctor. Some parts of it, some parts of it I loved, but there's parts of it that I just hated, but, people don't want to hear how their doctors hate their job. So it was, so the comedy was a release for sure. But it was also another mask. For a long time, I had a lot of insecurities about my life, a lot of insecurities about, how, smart I was or how able I was. So I would do all these things. I would become a medical doctor. I'd become a yoga teacher. I'd become a stand-up comic. I'd become a corporate speaker, and in a way that was kind of a mask to sort of just that I could put in front of the world, and I wouldn't have to show my real self. And the thing about this book is it really shows, my vulnerabilities. Like there's times where I couldn't leave the house for a week because I was so anxious. Or, the only time I would go is to sneak over to the park to get my dog over there so he could do his business and get back, So yeah, there was a lot of stuff in there that the comedy was kind of covering up.
Well, we are so excited we got to get your book out there. I'm sure that not only Christine and myself, everybody's going to learn a lot from this. And I know that we were supposed to have only one guest today, but it appears we had like 5. We had a doctor, we had an author, we had an entertainer, a comedian, a therapist, a dad. Thank you for coming to the show.
You're welcome. Does that mean I get 5 times the payment?
Yes, 5 times the exposure.
I'll take it.
We need a second round, Christine.
Yeah, we should, for sure.
And I wish we had more time, But
we can do it again.
Yeah, I think we should do another episode, right,
yes,
co-host?
Yes.
Yeah.
I totally agree.
Yeah, I like to make them practical. That's why I put, am I safe in this moment? That's what I really wrap up with is like, when you get upset, try and find where you're upset in your body and realize that that's your younger self asking for your attention. Put your hand on it, get connected to it. Ask yourself, am I safe in this moment? Is really, it's a brilliant question because it does show your unconscious that you are safe, even though it doesn't believe it. You just keep saying it over and over. So those are the 2 things that I really focus on with people because it really does lower their stress immediately. Of course, we can get into breathing and exactly how we, regulate our nervous systems, and that might be a kind of a nice topic to get into as well. But it's
Oh,
really
yes.
about connecting with your body, being in the moment, not allowing worry to transport you into the future. Because when you get into the future, there's no grounding there. It's really
Wow.
about staying in the moment that you're in, teaching yourself that, and really learning how. We didn't touch about this at all, but the book is really about finding parts about yourself that you really love and really focusing on that, because that's really what's going to make you feel connected to yourself. Is if we all focus on the stuff that we don't like about ourselves. But if we really just, one of the tenets of neuroscience is whatever you focus on, you'll get more of. So if you focus on what you like about yourself, you'll start seeing more things that you like about yourself. If you start focusing on what you don't like about yourself, you'll start focusing on more things and seeing more things that you don't like. So, we can certainly talk about that kind of stuff too. So anytime you want to have me on again, I'm always around.
That
That's
is
great.
exciting. That is
Great.
exciting. Well,
Love it.
thank you.
Yes. To find out more information about the book, we'll have it on the website, like the Jackie, right? We'll have it all
Yes.
there.
We'll
Okay.
have everything on here, how to contact Dr. Russ, how to get a hold of his book. And of course, our amazing friend and partner, Lisa Wartur of NoodleHead Productions, is always very, very efficient in providing us with all the resources
This is
that can
awesome.
help us. Yes, she's awesome. And then really, Dr. Russ, we thank you for your time and look forward without worries to the next
Yes.
episode with you.
Absolutely. Connect to
What an
yourself.
aha moment. Thank you for this therapeutic time.
Yes.
I feel so good already. Are you
Hey,
safe
Yeah,
where
I
you
do
are,
too.
Christine?
Yeah, I
Yes.
feel safe, and thank you so much, Dr. Kennedy.
You're welcome, Christine. You're welcome. Yeah. So just anytime you want to have me on again, I'm happy to do it. You guys are awesome. You're doing great work. And yeah, we'll get all hooked up and do this again sometime.
We appreciate very much.
Thank you.
And everyone, thank you for joining us, for joining our guest. And on behalf of my co-host, Christine Blanchette, thank you for joining us at Open Discussions. It's always a pleasure to meet new people on the team, on the panel, and discussing a lot about health. And Christine?
Yes, and thank you, Jackie, my co-host. It was a great time being here, and I can't wait for the next episode.
Yes.
So stay tuned.
Bye for now.
Bye.